Hey, it's CANDIA RAQUEL, founder of Centro de Poder, and you are in the Essential Sessions. If you are not subscribed yet, please go to centrodepoder.com and enter your email to get these episodes directly on your email every week. And today we have a special guest, Igor Adameyko. He is a developmental biologist that studies a number of diseases, and he has a special fondness for marine biology. Welcome, Igor. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and have all discussions with you today.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about Igor's work on developmental biology. But what is that? Could you tell us a little bit about what's developmental biology?
Yes, absolutely. So developmental biology is a fascinating science because it tries to answer a question how the complexity of our body comes from simplicity, right? Because we start our life as a single cell. When the sperm and the egg, they come together, right? They organize one single cell. And from one single cell, the entire diversity of cells in our body starts to develop. For example, in the brain, we have lots of neurons, the neurons that make us happy, the neurons that make us sad, the neurons that make us move, right? So there are hundreds of subtypes of these neurons. There are different types of muscle cells, vessels, like lots of things, hundreds and hundreds of them. And how do they get into place in the right order, in the right time? I find it totally interesting and fascinating. And I see lots of exciting stories in my studies of this phenomena, basically.
Wonderful. And speaking of which, how come we feel so much when we touch the skin softly than when we push a lot? Sometimes it's said in the somatic world that the skin is the nervous system, and there's also once you get strict, there's an indication of learning the softest touch to actually touch the nervous system, like say making circles in the cheek, but it has to be with the weight of the skin of a grape. If you apply a weight of touch that is of the skin of a peach, then it's too much. Then you're not perceiving on that level of nuances and supporting like the nervous system participation in a certain way. So I wonder, like, is that true, or is it a somatic crazy myth?
Well, I would say it's very complicated. Like, right? Many people hate when scientists say that, okay, we don't know, it's very complicated. It cannot be said yes or no, right? Because we are still investigating these things. And I think the topic of sensory biology is one of the hottest topics in today's science because big discoveries happen on a daily basis. At very basic level, we know that there are somatosensory neurons sitting in specific ganglia, groups of neurons next to our spinal cord. And these ganglia, they have this boring name, dorsal root ganglia. So there are several types of these neurons that live there. Some of them, they are called mechanosensory neurons. They are responsible for feeling basically the touch, the pressure, the vibration. Sometimes they have many sophisticated modalities. And when they project to the skin, they basically send a very long fiber, literally from your spine all the way to the tip of your finger. And now you can imagine the elephant or the whale, right? It can be several meters long. Yes, it's absolutely amazing. Yes, and the signal has to travel all that way. And when they end up in the skin, they don't just end up being there. They end up being in most cases within a specific structure. There is a tiny, tiny little sensory organ within the skin. So there are different Pacinian and Ruffini corpuscles, Meissner corpuscles, specific sensory organs. They're like tiny little buttons that things have to press to elicit the feeling of touch. And there are other neurons also sitting in the same ganglia that are called nociceptive neurons, and those are pain neurons. So they transmit pain, and temperature sometimes. And there are also proprioceptive neurons, and those get connected to our muscles and tendons, and those report the position of our body parts in space. If I close my eyes, I can touch the tip of my nose, right? Without having any visual information, right? So everyone can do that. So just try to close your eyes and touch your nose. And then like think about how do you know how to coordinate your movement to be so precise, right? Without seeing anything. And that's because these proprioceptive neurons, they tell you actually where is your hand at the given moment of time, where is the tip of your nose, what is the position of your head, and your brain using this input calculates everything. So our sensory systems, they are absolutely amazing. And even the glial cells that cover these nerve fibers, when these nerve fibers arrive to the skin, these glial cells, they participate in sensing the touch, for example, the pressure in the skin, and they also help to report. That's one of the most recent discoveries. Also, these processes, they're tunable. There are inflammatory processes in the nerves. As you know, many people, they struggle because of the chronic pain and so on. Yes. And there is a very big pharmacological science about which molecules in the nerves to target to get it sort of cured or get it better. I think that at this point, we require more investigations to understand the entire mechanosensory or pain pathway. And there is, I will tell you, one little enigma that currently fascinates scientists probably the most, those people who work with sensations, with some other sensory system, and this is itch.
Itch?
Right? Yes, it's itch, exactly. So if you think itch has nothing to do
is that pleasurable or painful? Because it's a pleasurable pain, because I have fallen from the skates and scratch, and it's like, oh, I need to stop, but yeah. It's a guilty pleasure.
Right. So yes, itch is something very interesting because our knowledge of some other sensory pathways is explaining how we feel touch. It's explaining how we feel pain. It gives us very good understanding of how we feel the temperature, for example. Right? But it does not really explain well why we sense itch and what is itch, actually. Right? So that's sort of enigmatic. And sometimes I see the scientific papers and discussions that the itch can inhibit pain. So it can substitute the pain. It can be sort of a solution to pain, right? And when the wounds are healing at some late point of healing, they start to itch, right? So and maybe that's to alleviate the pain that is sort of leaving the body and so on. So it's I guess itch can be a very good solution to pain treatment if we know how to deal with it. This is something very novel.
Interesting function of itch. There's a movie from Marilyn Monroe called The 7-Year Itch. And I think that's the picture with the famous scene of the white dress and Marilyn standing on the subway of New York. So I wonder if the pathway of pleasure is the same pathway of pain. Like, is the same highway, like you're driving your car and I am the car of pleasure and the one side is the one of pain. Is that the same way, or we have different pathways and different neurons, and where does each travel?
Yes. I would say that scientists look at this differently because the sensory pathway ends up somewhere in the brain, and then we perceive the pain, for example, right? But it's a perception that is born within the brain, right? So the pain pathway is not only made of sort of sensory neurons connecting to interneurons in the spinal cord and transmitting the stimulus. The important thing is how our brain interprets that signal, right? So, and we also know that if we expect the pain, for example, if we go to dentist and we expect the pain, then the things will feel more painful than probably they really are. So pain, and if we do not expect pain and it instantly comes as an unexpected thing, or you expect to have less pain, if someone tells you that well, it won't be that painful. In fact, you can relax, then the same amount of pain can be perceived as really less painful. So the mindset plays a very important role in how people perceive pain. This is very well established right now. Right?
That's so interesting, and I can testify on that, because when I went for my corona first vaccination, I was so anxious and so stressed since 24 hours before, and my pressure dropped when I saw the syringe, and a super drama for a little vaccination. And the second time, I was so happy, I don't remember why, and I was chatting on the phone and like, yeah, just make it quick. And my experience of pain was completely different. So it's fascinating how I didn't realize until you said it, like the role that mindset plays on the experience of pain, acting as a predisposition. And we in Pilates, we train a lot the activation of the core muscles, especially the transversus abdominis muscle, that is stability muscle, different from the bicep or the mobilizing muscles. And it's very helpful to train with imaginary, like the disposition to contract the muscle, and then it recruits. And it's said that it's a muscle that participates when you're about to carry a heavy load, and then knowing that you are about to do something helps it be recruited. And regarding to this mindset, do we know already in science something about a predisposition to amplify or welcome pleasure on a deeper level, or we don't know so much about it?
I think lots of things are known, but it's very hard to generalize. So unfortunately, I'm not a specialist in that particular topic. So probably the right person could probably explain things much better than me. But at least I can say that that's a very hot topic and very popular area of research. I think we know the areas of the brain that participate in these processes. So because we can sort of do functional MRI studies and we can measure those areas and we can track the activation. So when people experience pleasure, we can see which brain areas become activated. When people experience fear, we can see which brain areas become activated. The same for the pain. Typically, like when you look at these functional MRI images, the pain is not localized in one place in the brain. So there are several places where pain can delocalize. It's sort of like a mosaic of things, of activated areas that communicate with each other and with the rest of the brain, providing basically the perception of the pain. And sometimes people have these phantom pains or chronic pains, and then even without the inputs, constant inputs, so basically the pain in some patients and some people can be rooted actually in the brain. So they don't have a real stimulation, but they feel the pain because, well, basically all our world is in the brain, right? So that's where all sensations are truly born and exposed to our consciousness. And we cannot underestimate that part, right? So the sensory pathways, everything that connects us with the outer world is very important, of course, but ultimately everything converges onto the brain and what happens in the brain. I find it very interesting, of course. And like recently, like I've been like talking with my colleagues, and we've been discussing different cases in science, historical cases that we find weird and interesting and sometimes even scary. And
tell us all about it.
Yeah, and we came up with these old papers when doctors from British Empire, like approximately 100 years ago, they were going to India to study yogin practices, and because they heard a lot of legends about that yogins can do this and can do that, and almost like could do things that humans cannot do by definition, right? Contrary to the laws of physics and so on. So they really made an effort to find few popular yogins and access them, and they asked them to collaborate. And for example, there was kind of a saying about these yogins that they can stop their heart for long periods of time. So they can just voluntarily stop the heart and being in a dead state for like, for an hour or so, and then they can come back to life. And the doctor said like, wow, we want to investigate it. So we want to do recordings on the heart. So they came with equipment. So they connected these guys to the equipment and they started to do the recordings. And they quickly realized that, of course, they do not stop the heart fully, but they can really slow down the heart rhythm to tremendous values. And they could do it for many minutes, actually, which is quite surprising. Yes, that was quite remarkable. I don't remember, was it like for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes, but the regular people cannot do that, right?
That's like amazing.
Yes, so which suggests that some training, like how you interact with your brain, how you interact with your body functions, can get you in a state when you really start to control to some extent the operation of your inner organs, right? Probably through the work of sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, which are called autonomic, right? So they do not depend on seemingly on our voluntary, thoughts and activities. But it seems that with the correct training, people might control them to a certain extent, right? So we also know that the stress and the mood can impact, for example, the operation of digestive tract, right? And there is a very interesting gut-brain interface. So our guts are connected to our brain in a very interesting way. So they can really affect each other. So the life of our body is quite dramatically important, actually, to the degree that was not foreseen previously for the operations of our brain, even for intellectual activity, probably. So, and we live in a time when this is all getting investigated, and I think there will be some popular science books out soon where people can read about these things, and maybe they can start practicing some strategies to improve their health and their state of the mind based on these discoveries. So science is working towards this direction.
Yes. To help live a better life. It's
a happier life, at least.
A happier life, at least. And we have a choice. So we live on the demands of the modern world, that we are afraid of losing our jobs or not getting hired when we go to the interview, or getting pregnant or not getting pregnant. Like, we live immersed in stress. But is it completely bad to be stressed, or do we need stress to survive? Like, what's the fine line that could define how much is good and how little is no good?
Yeah. I'm not a big specialist in that field, and there is some general knowledge, some consensus in science about that I would say converges on a very general words like the prolonged stress is not good for health. So the prolonged stress, can accelerate aging. That was shown in many experiments on animals, and it can also facilitate the development of certain diseases. So being in a constant stress is not a great thing, right? And I think it's very important to learn the mindset that helps you to avoid being in a permanent stress. So the stress is not always caused by the danger that is very strong, that is life-threatening. Sometimes the stress can be caused by high degree of uncertainty of something, when we want something, but we're not certain whether we will get it or not, or when we are afraid of some kind of not so optimal outcome. It might be not life-threatening outcome, but we still get worried because of that, right? So when we don't have a permanent job position, we think what will happen to us in 10 years, right? And so on. Yes, I do not think these influences, they are positive, and it's good to find a way to cope with them, right? As I was mentioning, there are evolutionary strategies that are it's a hypothesis basically that probably favored that people could stay in a state of stress over a long time, because of course, if you live in a dangerous environment when another tribe of people can attack you and kill, or you live among dangerous animals. The jaguar can jump on your back and eat you, right?
Yeah.
So you have to stay aware, and you have to be reasonably stressed, right, to keep this awareness to protect your life. But these people of the past, they didn't live long lives, right? We know that most of them, they were dying at the brink of like 30 or 25, 30 years old. And now we live much longer, and we have high chances to spot the detrimental influence of the permanent stress. So I think it's very important to understand that there are always some uncertainties in our life. Life is never certain. When it's fully certain, it's probably boring.
Yeah.
So let's not get stressed over smaller things. Let's get stressed about big things.
Yeah, about serious things. And that has to do with adaptability to the environment, to really being present, like not to stress about little things. Like if there are no jaguars around and you have like everything in place, like then like adapt to the blooming, springy, colorful context of your environment. Do you think it's possible for a certain stress and the experience of pleasure to coexist, or everything has to be perfect in life so we can have pleasure and enjoy?
Well, again, I really don't know how to answer this question. So, as this is not exactly my field of study,
well, can be your
it's very hard to judge here. I think people need some diversity. They need some probably little ups and downs, and sort of some fight, some energy invested in this.
Yes.
Some issues to overcome and be proud of yourself. So that sort of like stimulates the inner growth. But this must be well balanced in a way, right? It needs to be a healthy thing, and I guess it shall not drag people in the state of a mind when they feel being pretty depressed, worried over small things all the time, like losing pleasure from the daily activities, right? If you wake up in the morning and you feel that, well, there will be a wonderful new day and somehow all the problems will be solved, then that's a great feeling. And I have to admit that I'm quite an optimistic person, but I'm sort of very often I'm losing that feeling. So very often I'm troubled by so many small things that in the long run are absolutely insignificant, and I'm still getting caught by them, and it takes me some effort to stop being stressed from them and feel happy, basically, like in the evening, in the morning, like, and basically to want continue living, basically, and going on.
Yeah, because you and we are all very perceptive, and perhaps it has to do also with, well, the experience and the subjectivity is one thing, but in practicality, I have caught this little piece of skin with a sheet of paper, and it's tremendously painful. Like I feel I am going to die. Like or yeah, and it's a minimal wound that hurts a lot. I mean, the experience of that pain is huge, whereas there are deadly types of cancer that are practically asymptomatic, or like osteoporosis that people don't know they have osteoporosis until the bone breaks and they find themselves in the floor. So maybe that's where awareness can jump in, and you can say like, okay, am I gonna die with this cause or not? And is it so serious that the battery of my phone broke and I have to throw to the garbage the phone? Like, yes, it's serious, but like, what's the respective relevance to let it unfold as a maybe a chemical state in your mind that can be unsuitable for health? And you research about self-fate. As much as I remember and know of my microbiologist times, that had to do with the differentiation of cells. Does lifestyle and taking care of yourself can influence that or not?
That's very far-fetched, I would say. So cells and the lifestyle, well, they are, of course, interconnected, but there are so many intermediates. It's like, asking if the, I don't know, solar activity can be influenced by our human civilization in a way. Yes, of course it can if we do lots of, bad things to the galaxy. Probably there will be some stuff like that. So the cells that build our bodies, they finish building our bodies when we are born, when we grow, and yeah, at some point our body is done, and only stem cell niches, they self-renew different compartments. Our skin is self-renewed, for instance, our blood is self-renewed, and so on. Our gut is self-renewed, and the lifestyle can influence these processes to a certain degree, right? And over time, this can be accumulated. For instance, if we have bad habits, if we drink a lot of alcohol, if we smoke a lot, if we consume dangerous substances, and so on, we can expect that a number of pathologies will develop, right? Because the cells in our body will be affected. Stem cells will take wrong decisions. Healthy cells can give rise to tumor cells, and so on. So there are lots of these potentials. But if we are talking about the sort of the mindset and these type of things, I guess what science can say right now is that if we are in a state of permanent stress, if we are depressed, if we lose the happiness feeling, then there are, of course, things in the body that will also go to decline. So when we are in the permanent stress, the balance of stress hormones changes in the body, and these hormones, they're very important, powerful molecules. They will influence the life of our cells and stem cell niches. Yes, so these effects might accumulate if we are in that state long enough. So we still don't know all associations. So there is a whole epidemiology about that. Lots of interesting papers, scientific publications explaining this. But we know very little about the particular details and connections between the mindset and pathology, or mindset and health. So I would suggest to go and just read the scientific literature on that point, but everything is connected in this universe. So better be happy and healthy. That's my conclusion, but it's hard to achieve, right?
Everything's connected inside the body, and also in this planet as an ecosystem. And as you mentioned before this recording, we can find stories in the complexity of our own life, like the cells and our organization, and also in the context of the biosphere. And I know that you like a lot marine biology, and that you were recently scuba diving in Iceland. What do you like so much about marine life?
I think I like the diversity of marine life, and I also enjoy tremendously how it looks. It has this extraterrestrial appearance. So like when I go underwater, I feel like I'm traveling another planet, something of that sort, specifically if I go underwater during the night. There is also like important dimension of this type of experience or this type of research that I would like to mention. These days we can travel everywhere quite easily, right? So every working person can go somewhere and experience new landscapes, new cultures, and so on. But there are places, the dimensions where we cannot travel without science, right? Because we need specific equipment and knowledge, we need microscopes, we need people who understand things. And I think the major role of science is to expand our perception of reality, to open up deep layers, inaccessible layers of reality, and expose people to those layers. Because the world is so rich, complex, and beautiful, it's a gift, and every person can really receive this gift, can be a receiver. And I think despite that we are continuously suffering from the stress, from uncertainties in our life, sometimes from different tragedies, we can always stop for a moment. We can always sort of like get into our own mind and find this moment of peace, because the world is wonderful around us. And typically we pay very little attention to all that beauty and diversity. And I think every person needs to exercise this kind of like stopping and achieving this state of like being a recipient of this gift, right? So, and I as a scientist, I personally hope that at some point my science helps people to see the world to a greater extent, to a more beautiful extent. And that's where my passion for marine biology comes from.
Yes, 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 100% agree. Tell us, how can we know more about this wonderful view that you have on life and your research on marine biology?
Yes, I think that can be really inspirational to many people, and it's very easy to find me. You can just go to Instagram and then you can find the story of a biologist. If you type the story of a biologist, or you type Igor Adameyko, my name, then you will definitely find my Instagram page, and you can follow me and see all these marine beautiful creatures there. And there are lots of people that I also cross post sometimes with their stories. So we are the whole community of people who love this, and it makes us happy.
Yes, thank you for reminding us how beautiful, unique, and an incredible gift life is, our life, and being alive in this moment in time, in this area where we have so many possibilities and access to knowledge, and we can travel and learn and know more, and we have the means to go out of our biased stress to really come forth to life. Thank you so much, Igor. It's been a pleasure. I am honored to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was wonderful. And yes, I wish everyone a good peace of mind and lots of happiness. Thank you.
Thank you. And Essentialist, if you haven't already, go to centralpoder.com and subscribe to get the Essential sessions on your email. And remember, take time to know your fire so you can share the flame. Thank you and see you next time.